Glenda Jackson, what drives a successful actress, movie star, into politics?
Well, in my own personal case, it was because I was and still am so appalled at the direction that my country is going, which I think is entirely the result of Conservative government over the past 11 years. The whole ethos that is being attempted to be brought into being in my country is something that I never thought I would ever live to see. I mean, I never felt that I would be ashamed of being English, but I have felt deeply ashamed of being English on many occasions over the past 11 years. For me, it's essentially in the field of what I would call, I suppose, the social fabric of my country. I am a product of the welfare state. If that hadn't come into being after the end of the Second World War, the opportunities that have come my way probably wouldn't have, and I certainly would not have been in a position to exploit them. And so to see a government, the ex-leader of which said at one point, there is no such thing as a society, when everything I most deeply hold dear has absolutely to do with the belief that the total can be greater than the sum of the parts, that the individual can still remain an individual but combine with other individuals to produce the kind of energy that changes situations for the better. And the idea that we had a government that didn't accept that as a basic platform for how any civilized society should view its possible future is, to me, almost anathema. That's, in a sense, on the social level, and on the harsh economic level. I mean, we're clearly going down the tubes, and if someone doesn't stop the run fairly soon, we'll be past the U-bend and no way of pulling us back. I've never seen so many beggars on the streets of major cities in my country in my lifetime. I've never ever had the experience of watching children having to sleep in cardboard boxes and plastic bags, and that incident of young homelessness, which at one point seemed to be centred solely on London, and I thought shamefully and disgracefully half a mile from the Palace of Westminster, is now spreading to every major city in England. And this is 10 years away from the 21st century. So clearly something is not going right.
And would you place the blame solely and totally at the feet of Margaret Thatcher?
Well, you can't lay it solely and totally at the feet of Margaret Thatcher, but Margaret Thatcher stayed in power, in essence, because she was surrounded by other people who firmly believed, if not necessarily in her policies, in her power to ensure their jobs by winning elections. I mean, I think that is very clear in what happened in the debacle of her being thrown out as leader of her party. No one in that party, none of her cabinet colleagues, with, I suppose, the exception of Michael Heseltine, who was not at that point a member of her cabinet, asked then, when it was first introduced, that there should be a fundamental review of the poll tax. When British citizens were facing the possibility of prison terms for no greater crime that they simply didn't have the money to pay that iniquitous tax, her government was not standing up saying we must review this. When children had to leave home because they knew their parents couldn't afford to pay their portion of the poll tax, no one stood up to be counted then. Local government, regardless of its political complexion, went to them in their drove saying we cannot make these figures work. If this is what you impose, we simply cannot provide the kind of services that you have deemed statutorily we must give to our citizens. No one stood up then to be counted. So she was very much the pinnacle of a party that believed that they were on some kind of roll, and that those aspects of society were saying, excuse me, just hang on a minute, this isn't working. What about those who have least and are clearly being seen to have less? That was simply disregarded and rolled over.
And yet she's described by people who know her, who've got to know her over the years, friends of hers, as being a most compassionate woman. Do you find it impossible to reconcile this description of this woman from people who know her with the public Margaret Thatcher?
Well, I do. I mean, how can one argue that this woman is compassionate when we have watched child benefit, for example, be frozen at the rates at which it was when she took over in office, and when we have, as we have had in my country, inflation raging at above 10%, when interest rates were raging above 12, 14%, when old age pensioners in my country are expected to try and live on £52 a week, when the waiting lists in hospitals have been increased, and where there is this continuous canker of homelessness. I can't conceive that that kind of person is, in my book, would fit my definition of what constitutes being compassionate.